Hey, again, happy Father's Day. So I did a reflection video on my dad. I feel like I left some things out. When you got an old man, you love him. A lot of history there. You can't never remember all of it. At any given moment in time. So I kind of developed a short list of some other things. Some specific memories, but mainly. One thing about my dad had the most infectious laugh. Um, I I'm I'm not going to even attempt to try to mimic it, but he loved to laugh, and it didn't take much to make him laugh. He wasn't a big joke teller. He laughed at other people's jokes and all the funny things about life. He would just belly laugh and just so infectious. He was a science teacher, for his career. He loves snakes. Oh my gosh, I hate snakes. In that respect, I am nothing like my dad. He was always finding snakes and come up to me, and it'd be a little baby snake. Hey, close your eyes and hold out your hands. I'm like, no way, you know. So he taught me about snakes and at least helped me to identify the snakes that I hate. I've kind of gotten over that as I've gotten older, but as a child, I did not like snakes. Another thing I remember about him, it was different in those days. Before now, we're all extreme liability thinking. We don't ride around in the back of a station wagon anymore. If I had $1 for every mile I had to ride on a yellow dog bus on some cold winter night with a bunch of stinky teenage football players, going to all these towns, because he coached football and he coached basketball and he coached track. And when he wasn't coaching, he was scouting. He would go scout, for the high school. And when he wasn't doing that, he would officiate. Back then, in the 70s primarily, 70s and 80s, teachers didn't make a lot of money. Almost every male teacher was a coach and a teacher and a referee official combination. In addition to having a summer gig job, every coach I knew, that was his life. Um, Coach, scout, officiate. Summer comes, it was enjoyable, but you had to work. Me and my dad, we painted houses. By the time I was 13 or 14 years old, he had cut me in on half the business. I could I could hang with him in terms of work because I probably started when I was 9 or 10, and he was letting me keep half the money by then, and we'd paint houses all summer long, and probably one or two roofing jobs we would do. Um, so in addition to all that, he gave me a pretty good work ethic. Um, and I can't thank him enough for that. But all those times on those yellow dogs, I swear, I went through a period, in my life. Once I got out on my own in my early 20s, I think it was like 5 years before I ever went to Dairy Queen and bought that steak finger basket because I had ate so many thousands of those, it seemed like, on bus rides to football games and basketball games. You know, listen at me, ungrateful kid, like it's a real cross to bear to have to eat, you know, at a Dairy Queen and all these places. But yeah, there was it was just something over and over and over, cycle repeat, and I loved it at the time. there was times I'd rather not go, and he took me anyway. So I would watch him, go with him, And this was even when I was a small child, 5 or 6 years old. You know, that was my life during school season, was going with my dad. Probably 60 or 70% of the times he'd go anywhere. Um, and one memory I have of him, and just kind of stuck. As I was a little older, my older teens, I was able to kind of talk shop with him. I went to a lot of basketball games. I, we were escorted out of towns by the police several times when heated games went south. And I asked him one time, I said, how do you put up with all the abuse that gets hurled at you, especially being a basketball referee, because on the football field you can't really hear the fans. In the indoor basketball gyms, back then everybody's talking smack to the referees, and it could get pretty. It could, again, it was different then. It took a lot to get ejected from a basketball game as a spectator. And I asked him one time, how do you put up with it? And he told me, he said, I'll never forget, he said, Lance, being called a effing zebra is just part of being a ref. Yeah, that sticks with you. And that was his, carefree kind of blow it off kind of attitude. I was, I was kind of hot head. Always had something to prove. But yeah, those are great times looking back. I went with him a lot of places and saw a lot of men things. A lot of card games, drinking exhibitions. That were called camping trips. And I'd be one of the only kids there watching my dad and his coaching, teaching buddies. Because back then, it was so different. They actually had an annual party out at the lake. Because back then, they could actually, they said anyway, that they wasn't supposed to drink alcohol. They would fire you for extramarital affairs, and such. And so my dad and his legion, they would go out and have these annual, semi-annual, or multiple, times a year camping trips. Bunch of middle-aged men, I thought they were old as hell, but they were 35, 40 years old, drinking and playing cards and, chopping wood with their hands, doing Bruce Lee stuff, and just being stupid, and I enjoyed it. I was a sponge. I soaked it all in, because back then it was sort of, a phrase I grew up hearing over and over was, little boys are to be seen and not heard. And so I listened a lot, hanging around with my dad and his coaching buddies and stuff. He never taught me much about women. That I guess back then you just didn't do that. You just had to learn it on your own. I don't know that I have much to teach, or will try to even, help my boys with that mystery. But yeah, definitely kind of a 20th century male centric existence, that I lived in. A great time. Again, memories of my father, like a little puppy dog in his shadow all the time, soaking it in, trying to be like him, trying to be better than him, carve my own way and all that. And again, just I really, really value my father. He's probably not going to see this because he ain't on Facebook. But again, Just want to throw that out there. Talk it out. Commit it to digital print, so to speak. I think it's kind of important to do that. I have more plans. Speeches for my sons, episode 44. Stay tuned, right?